the two of them. So they were suggesting that if I need help, maybe I'll need help with the inspecting the honey apiary out here in Ames or something like that. So maybe there's some people that are working on their master beekeeper that need hours, or some newer beekeepers that live near Ames and just would be happy to come help out. So put the word out. Julia
Randall needs
McGuire, I'm
help.
talking to you if you know anybody, because you're just down in Des Moines. So what were you saying,
I'll
Judy?
come help you, Randall.
Oh, yeah, come on up, Andy. You're what, 3 hours away?
No, it's just over an hour to Ames from Grinnell.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll keep people in the loop.
I've also found that training new graduate students and undergrads can be kind of hard, because you have to build in extra time, because everybody kind of works bees at kind of a different speed, and you forget how quickly you can inspect hives and go through, and you're still waiting on folks to catch up with you. We're like, we got a whole yard to go through, guys.
Right. And not only that, but we had to move 60 hives to different field sites. And the two people that were hired to help me out with that are both maybe 100 pounds. So luckily we've got one of those metal frame lifters. So they were doing that. And I was just giving myself a hernia trying to move everything else by myself. So
Take it for someone who's 5'2.5". Bring some stools and bring some like extra equipment, because you need that leverage. I mean, you can't get hives up on the truck and yeah.
So you lift up onto a stool and then move up one more, or how do you? As,
No,
as a
sometimes
resident short expert, can you give us some tips?
if I have it, sometimes what you can do is you're on the stool and you're lifting lower, but you can lift up higher because you started on a stool. But you're not. I'm not talking about a big old stool. I'm talking about like a kid's step stool.
Maybe you could lift and then step up. I feel would be better for your back. Or yeah.
So when I've had to do things with shorter people than we've taken empty equipment that we're using in the yard. We'll put it next to the bed of the truck.
Mm-hmm.
We'll lift
the
it up
lid.
onto that, and then it gets low enough that then you can, like an Egyptian, like you're lifting up there, like the throne thing, you just put it on your shoulder and you just stand then. So you lift one onto the box, then you get underneath it, then you just stand up. So it's like two different movements.
What is the thing that you're lifting with?
The hive lifter.
Okay. Well, and we're lucky we have a truck that's got a lift gate on it. So we're lucky that we'll use the hive lifter and we'll put the lift gate all the way down, and then we can lift it up and shove them in. So that's been lucky, at least for loading the truck.
I'll also reposition my hand so it's below the box, so I have a little bit more leverage, or I'll use my knee to kind of lift it up a little bit. It's when you're small like that, you've got to use what you have. So you use your body parts, use your hip to leverage the weight when you're pulling boxes, or use parts of your body so you're not, putting too much pressure on your back and your knees, So there's ways that you can kind of move boxes on and off that are heavy.
Yeah. Well, I'm just lucky that these new workers who aren't that familiar with bees, don't want to get stung, and can't lift that much. I was really worried they weren't going to come back the next day, and they did. They're committed. So now it's just a matter of getting them used to getting stung, getting them used to all the beekeeping stuff. So.
Yep, and there's a comment that says you can use dollies to roll the hives too.
Oh, that would be, yeah, that might be. Just where we're going, it's such.
Use the skid loader.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Put them on pallets and use the skid loader.
Yeah, it's real easy. Well, and the sites that we're going out to the middle. We're looking at, so here at ISU, we really encourage prairie strips, which is a CRP practice where you can put strips of prairie into your farmland. And what we're trying to see is that impact on honeybees and native bees. But we're trying to, in the past, we've seen that it benefits a handful of hives when they're at that site, because they benefit from the soybean bloom, but also from that late season prairie bloom. But we're like, well, on a commercial scale, could we tell someone to put 20 or 30 hives here and that it would benefit? So that's why we're trying to get 20 hives out at every site. but that also means that we are on this we're out in the middle of a field to get there. So it's not exactly the best terrain. It's been an adventure.
So we always get into happy hour and then it just becomes this really informal chat. So I'm going to say welcome everybody to happy hour. Randall Cass from ISU and Judy Woosmar and Sheldon Brummel. We are both from UNL. We just kind of set this up informal Q&A session. Sometimes we'll show some photos. Sometimes we'll have a few discussion, focused starters. But really, this is an opportunity for people to ask questions, or people who are having trouble with management of their hives or seeing issues, just to get a little extra support and help. We started this last year during the pandemic, and when everybody was unable to get into the yards and actually work bees with one another, Randall and I started this and did it for every week for almost the entire summer.
And I think people would love us to go back to every week, but yeah.
Yeah, it was it's always fun to engage with beekeepers and try to talk to folks to see what things are going on regionally, but it's also a little bit a long it's summer, so we're both handling a lot of research and extension programs and a lot of new and fun things this year. So sometimes the weekly commitments can be a little bit difficult, but we encourage you guys to come with questions and pictures.
And I have a quick kind of photo update. I think I talked about this. I can't remember what day our last meeting was. I think I just shaken all of our packages for our research hives. And I might have mentioned, for the people who weren't there. So we shook all of our 80 packages. And then we were cleaning things up. And in front of the bee barn, we saw a big swarm on the ground. And so we got down next to it and we were looking for, well, here you can see one of my colleague, Dr. Alex Walton down there trying to look through it, trying to find a queen. We were like, did a queen get away? But we thought maybe they were just pheromoning, their aggregation pheromone, and that all these bees that got lost in the package dumps just all aggregated in the same spot. So what I did was I just set a hive next to them and kind of scooped them in. I tried to do like a, what do you call it? Like a slow speed video. I wanted them all to like get the video of them all moving into the hive, and it only kind of worked.
One of the time lapse?
Yeah, time lapse. Thank you. It was only okay. So then we thought, well, if there's not a queen in there, we've got some other hives over here. I'll take a frame with eggs in it, put it right there in the middle, and they can rear their own queen. So then I checked on it a week later, and there was 7 queen cells. So I was really excited. I was like, they'll pick the best one. It'll be fine. They're requeening themselves. Apparently, there was no queen there. So there were 7 queen cells. And then I came back maybe about a week later, week and a half, and checked on them. And there was only 1 queen cell left. And I was like, well, that's interesting. And then I came back the next week, and there was nothing. No eggs, no. And I was just like, I think this is just one of those cases where the bees just don't do what you want them to do, right? Yeah. But then I was talking to Amy Toth about it, and we were doing the math, and I was like, we might be in that short window where there's a virgin queen in there, and she's just not laying yet. Let's give them another week before we throw them onto another hive. Mm-hmm. And I went and checked them. My dad was in town last night, and we were having a beer and talking about it. And I said, I was explaining to him what had happened, and I was like, why don't we just go out there and check on it and see if that queen's in there laying eggs? So I took my dad out to the bee yard, and we opened it up, and sure enough, just lots of brood, lots of eggs, everything in there. So that's pretty exciting. That I'm just glad that it worked, because they don't always requeen themselves when you want them to, and sometimes you just get a bunch of laying workers. But I think we had the season to our advantage. It's springtime; they're ready to go. So yeah, I feel pretty good about that. So now we have an extra hive, just caught from all the leftover package swarms. So. Yeah.
We also collected a swarm. Maybe I'll pull up a photo of it somewhere, but we got a swarm call. And a swarm had just went into a tree in the parking lot of Lowell's, but it was like right outside their front entrance. So they like put up caution tape, and it almost felt like you were on like show, you know, trying to remove this swarm with all these people in the parking lot watching you. The guy from the blood bank came over and gave me a stool because I was so short. I couldn't reach the branches as I'm pulling this thing down. So yeah, it was great for the community assist. The stools, they're excellent.
Well, we've got a little step ladder. I'll have to remember to bring it with us to the field.
All right, so if Sheldon can take a look at the chat, I know we had a lot of chat box conversation. I'm gonna pull up the slides. I just had some photos of our some of the things that we've been doing, and then we can chat some more. So we also hived our bees. And Sheldon, if there's questions or there's conversations, go ahead. I can't pull it both up, so just chime in. We hived our packages in April, and then we got nukes in May. A lot of our bees go through a lot for teaching, and there's Luke with our new feeder, so he's really super excited with our pump.
Oh,
And
that's
then
so
the
great.
packages look great. Actually, these packages are, they need supers now, but these packages were hived on foundation. So they do tend to develop much more slowly. So we generally encourage people who are getting packages to get them an early shipment, because as soon as, if you're needing the bees to draw out wax like these ones, once the honey flows, they're not really going to draw out any more wax on that foundation. So getting them earlier and getting them started on wax foundation, I like wax building, I think is helpful. That's, I think, why a lot of people like to go with the nukes, because they're just kind of faster development. You've got brood, you've got food. We hived our nukes in May because that was the earliest we could get them. And then when we get nukes, I encourage everybody to just give them a check, make sure that they're queen right, make sure that there's no signs of diseases, how much brood, how much food is available, because you're going to have to be putting the frames in and the nuke itself into the colony in a way that it depends on if you want them to expand, if you've got enough room, or if they need to build a little bit more. I took some photos. I was just gonna let this kind of sit there and see if anybody want to put in the chat box what are some things that you don't want to see in your nukes.
Mm.
Yeah, Randall, go for it. You know.
Deformed wing virus.
Yeah, can you point it out? Who's got their annotation tool? They can point it out.
Oh, annotate.
Oops, I don't
Let's
know what I
see.
did there. There's one right there.
Here's one right here.
When you start looking, you actually you kind of see a lot more. They don't have to be all equal in severity. Some of it just crinkly. Some of it is just at the very edge, you know, one wing. Yeah, exactly. I mean, once you start looking for them, there's actually quite a lot of examples here with the deformed wing virus. And then the deformed wing virus is an indication that it was pretty, sorry, I just cleared it, pretty, pretty high varroa infestation at some point in their developmental period. So these bees are clean of mites because they recently treated and knocked all those mites off, but clearly they had a mite problem early on during the development of these drone bees. Other
Joe,
things.
I just want to, if I'm a beekeeper and I get a nuke or a package and I notice that a bunch of the bees have deformed wing virus, what would you recommend that I do?
Well, normally what I do with the entirety of the inspection is I kind of will kind of give a summary of how many colonies were healthy, were what I expected to be the size, and then I'll make notes on how many I saw problems with. And sometimes you don't have really big issues where you feel like you need to kind of address them with your supplier. And in some cases, it was a bad transport or something went wrong, and you do need to communicate that with your supplier. You know, so this one right here is pretty common when you see nukes coming into the spring and it happens to be a little bit on the wetter side. You guys see what I'm seeing here in the brood? Are people writing it in the chat? I can't see.
I'm circling.
No, I'm
it.
good on the chat.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. That's chalk brood. So a lot of times nukes will sometimes show up with chalk brood. If it's a little bit of chalk brood on the edge like this, and you don't see it throughout the colony, it's not really a big deal. Chances are maybe they the colony receded a little bit and it got a little bit of chalk brood or damage to the brood. So that's common sometimes. It's the severity of the chalk brood that you have to really kind of watch out for. So let's see if I can find another example.
Well, what about the perforated? I'm circling. Oh, no. There was some perforated cells. It kind of looked like what I would call the crud.
Oh yes, yes. Here, let me go back. How do I go back? There it is. So you're talking about over here.
Yeah.
And over here.
Yeah.
It's a little bit hard to tell with those because you have perforated cells with high mite loads, but you also have perforated cells when hygienic bees begin to remove diseased brood. Mm-hmm. So it could be that they're just starting to uncap it and starting to remove it. Or it could be just a symptom of that disease. That's really kind of a hard one to tell,
Yeah.
And I was going to say, Judy, with these colonies, when we put them out in the sun, the next day they had thrown all of the chalk brood out, like what you were talking about with just the shipping and whatnot.
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of times it's not like a huge concern because the bees can clean it out. It's when there's a lot of chalk brood, not a lot of healthy, strong workers to clean it out and care for the existing brood, then you start to have an issue. What about this one? You guys see what's wrong with this frame here? Yeah, somebody just circled that drone brood right there. This is hard to see on a picture, but you can see how these are kind of jutted out and kind of bulleted over here as well. You can actually tell here too, because their eyes meet at top of their heads. These are drones coming out of their emerging drones. Deformed wing. Drones.
I realized that my new sunglasses look like drone eyes. I'll be right back. I'm calling them my drone sunglasses.
Let's see them.
I feel like they kind of look like drone. The little bug eyes put together. Yeah.
Yeah, they do.
So what's wrong with the drone cells on the sides?
Well, it's not so much as having drone cells, but you want to think about when you have a nuke. The nuke could be a 4-frame nuke or a 5-frame nuke, but what you expect to see is 3 frames of brood and maybe 1 or 2 frames of food on the edges. So what you're paying for is the brood. So what you want is productive brood that is going to be productive at growing the colony. These are drones, so they're really just going to provide some genetics for the yard, yes. But if it's a drone layer or a failing queen and a drone laying queen or a laying worker situation, then basically this nuke is either queenless or not producing the right offspring to sustain the need of the colony. Okay. So if you see a frame like this where the predominant brood is drones, then the next step for me is to actually look for a queen. If a queen is present, she might be failing. If a queen is not present and I see lots of eggs being laid on the sides of the cells, then I know there's a laying worker in here and it's not even queen right.
Okay.
Judy, do you think it's possible that the supplier was just pulling some old frames or pulling frames out of other hives? And so it might not even be this queen's brood. It might have been just a frame that they put in to get out and get to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a lot of things that can happen, right? So I don't judge anything on just one frame. But when I see a frame like this, it does make me want to look a little bit more closely at what else is making up this nuke. Certainly, they can pull frames from all sorts of colonies and put them together. And sometimes what they're doing is they're introducing a queen cup into them. So then the queen will come out, mate, and start laying. Or they'll requeen them with an actual queen. But there's a lot of things that can happen. So if it doesn't requeen correctly, a commercial beekeeper is not going to know every single colony is actually queen right or queen wrong before they ship it all out. They're going to requeen it, they're going to load it, and then they're going to take it over. So sometimes during transport or whatever happens, maybe the queen got injured. In this particular case, there was no queen, and it was no it was hard to say whether it was the beginnings of a laying worker or it was just, a failing queen that we missed or couldn't see. But there wasn't, in this case, there weren't any really healthy, open young larvae or eggs to indicate that it was a queen right colony during transport. So a lot of times if I see this kind of thing, I want to see how much brood is in there and what age I would expect to see in a queen right healthy nuke or a full-size colony, the presence of eggs, young larvae, older larvae, pupae, and young bees, young adult bees, newly emerged bees. If I see all of those, then I know that that colony is functioning correctly.
So this will be one that you keep an eye on then. Were these inspections from this week?
No, these were during the first inspection of the nukes.
Okay.
So when I looked at my list, I knew which ones were potentially queen, failing queens, or laying workers, or needed to be rechecked. The other thing I do is if I see a situation like this where there's no eggs, I don't know if it's queen right or not, I'll introduce a frame of young eggs and larvae, and I'll go back and see, is that colony producing a new queen cell or not? And many of these did produce queen cells. But I didn't let them requeen themselves. I cut the queen cells and requeen them with an actual mated queen. And that's because in early May, if I let them requeen themselves, it's going to be another 14 days of development and then several more days for mating before they start laying. So that's 3 weeks that I'm losing of productive egg laying. Meanwhile, when there's nothing to care for, those are extra bees plugging in those cells with nectar. So you're starting to honeybound your colony while you're trying to queen right it. So oftentimes in the spring, we will just requeen it with a mated queen, get them going nice and big, because you have to get the colony big enough before the nectar flow, or you miss out. Sometimes when you get your nukes, and you don't have any old drawn combs, and all you have is empty foundation, it's not always ideal to just put the foundation on the outside, because if you think about the way the nuke is formed, you've got food on the outside here and here, and then these are the brood frames. Sometimes they won't go out to the outside because there's just, you've got a food barrier here and a food barrier here. So there's really no reason to go over there. So sometimes we will checkerboard or insert the foundation, undrawn foundation here. So now it's inserted between the food and the brood. So we're encouraging the bees to expand that wax drawing, because now we've put an obstacle in between their food and their brood, and they want to draw out wax. I'll usually do that with the first, when we first get a nuke, I'll put one side in. If it looks really strong, I'll put both sides in and expand it.
Judy,
But you want to do this early on. Again, if your nectar flow hits, they're not going to really want to draw out comb, and they're very stubborn with it.
I have a question about, so when we were putting together our hive bodies with frames for our packages, we used mostly, in each one, we included 2 frames of undrawn wax foundation because we want to get them drawn out. And
Mhm.
about half of our hives are not drawing directly off of the foundation on those frames. They're drawing their own comb that then they can go on the underside of, and we can't actually get a good idea of. Do you know what that's about, or how to get them to not do that?
Are you waxing them?
um, I don't think these ones were waxed. These were. I'm not sure where they got pulled from, but I don't think they got waxed. Do you think waxing would help quite a bit with that?
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. Waxing helps. And the other thing that helps is checking the food on the frame, right? So let's say, for example, this food frame is all open nectar cells. The bees are going to take that and just continue to build off this frame inward, because it's much easier to just build off of what's existing than to build from the other side. So normally what I do, if I'm doing this, if I'm checkerboarding it, this is capped honey. Because if it's capped honey, they're done with it. They're not going to keep building it outward beyond the width of the frame. So now you're forcing the bees to build this way, because that's capped honey, and that's capped honey.
Judy, we got a few questions from chat. So Arthur wanted to know, how did you know they wanted to swarm? How do you know if they want to swarm, basically?
Actually, I took I took some photos. I didn't actually load them up here, but there's a lot of different ways you can tell that the colony wants to swarm. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it tomorrow at the NECBA talk. So if you're interested and there's someone on the chat box who knows about the NECBA Fun Day event, please put the link on. Otherwise, Sheldon, maybe you can dig it up. But basically, if you have a queen that is really laying and is laying a beautiful pattern, the colony could prep for swarming despite having lots of frames. If she feels crowded, if oftentimes, I wish I had a photo I could show you. The package that we were dealing with it when we hived it into this box. Actually, it's actually this colony too. This one. This colony, we hived it, and it's on a second deep. And I checked it today, took some photos, took some videos. It was getting ready to swarm, and some of the signals of that was in the first, when we put the second box on, she moved upstairs and laid everywhere she could. But because they were on foundation, it really was only 3 or 4 frames on the top box that she was laying. There just wasn't enough space for her to lay anywhere else. So in those newly drawn combs of newly laid eggs, there's also queen cups that they're starting to form to begin swarming. You can also see on the edge of the brood clusters, her egg laying becomes a lot more sparse, inconsistent, and it if you're looking closely at her brood patterning, based on what she has in terms of her sealed brood and what she's laying, you can kind of tell when the queen is starting to slow down her egg laying. And then if she's in her second box, on that top box, there's no more places to lay. Oftentimes it's hard for her to go back down to the box. So she wants to keep moving up. So what we'll do is we'll squash those swarm cells or cups and then reverse the colony, because on the bottom box is where all her older brood is. They're sealed, but they are going to open up and allow her to relay. So we're putting her on the bottom. We're putting the younger eggs and secured on the bottom. We're moving the sealed brood to the top. They're going to come out. She's going to be able to relay. But what's important is I'm also putting a super on top. so that they don't keep depositing honey in there. So I'm basically bringing the brood line right up to the bottom of the supers. And that will allow the bees to put nectar in the supers in the right place rather than honey bounding and working downward. So that's swarm management and also getting kind of ready for supering. I'll have the videos and the pictures set up for tomorrow's talk. If you guys want to see that, you can see the images of that. I didn't have it ready for today because I went to go check on it today. This is another example of one of the nukes that we got. You can tell just from the top of the box, this is much smaller than the previous one in population size. So I wouldn't checkerboard that. I would also double check to see if that colony is queen right, if is expressing any kind of disease issues. Can you guys see any issues with this comb right here? Maybe I can point it out.
I'm muted. The brood pattern doesn't look too great.
No, the brood pattern does not look not great at all. And it's also chalk brood, quite a lot of it. So this is a case where I think the chalk brood is probably, you know, hitting the brood pretty hard. And so if you want to help a little bit with boosting this colony, if I see they're having some brood issues and you have a lot of colonies to play around with, you could give it a little bit more brood. But I would give it emerging brood so that they have young bees, adults to take care of it. So right now, the demand on the colony to remove and hygienically remove those mummies that you see on the floor right here, if you're not sure how much you're dealing with, this is like the next day, they're starting to pull it all out. That's a huge energetic demand on those bees. There's going to be a lot of bees preoccupied cleaning out those cells. So one of the things you could do is to just boost them by giving them some fresh workers. You don't want to give them brood they have to take care of, or brood that they have to keep warm if it's cold still, but you do want to give them a little bit more of the worker force that can help boost the brood that's she's producing and get rid of the disease. Oh, this one was an interesting one. This was a package that didn't get hived right. Some reason the queen just wasn't, performing very well. And in May 12th, it was still queen right, but there was only 1.5 frame of bees, adult bees, and half a frame of brood. It was hived on new equipment. And a lot of people, will buy 2 colonies to start because one will outperform another, or maybe they equally perform. It's the luck of the draw when you get packages. Those adult bees might be young. If they're young, they're going to draw out wax for you really, really quickly. But if those bees are really old, they're not as physiologically adapted to comb construction and building comb. So what actually ends up happening is they constrict their potential and her egg laying potential because they're not building the cells for her to lay in. So that's what happened here, was that they just didn't do comb building. And after 2 weeks, 3 weeks, that's all they have right there. So that's the only thing that she had to lay on. It's 2 frames that had about that much wax drawn on either side. So a lot of people say, well, what do I do? It must be a bad queen, or something's wrong with the hive. We ended up adding 2 frames of adults and brood from a queenless colony that doesn't have a queen, and just boosting this colony. So here's the queen right here. She's nice and big. She's healthy. I wanted to show, let's see. Okay, here. I added the frames of newly emerged bees and brood here and here. And these are the cells that had the queen in here. So the queen is on this frame right here. And there's a little bit of comb here, and there's a little bit of comb here, and then there was a little bit of comb on this one over here. There was really nothing kind of on the either side of the outside of that. So I put the drawn comb and bees there, and it's giving them a little bit of time to associate and migrate, and they're already coming from a colony that is queenless. So what I'm showing here is the little blue arrows. If I took those 2 frames out and opened it sideways, that's what I saw. So this is just kind of showing you, was it on, I write this on the box, you can probably see it. 512, I did a check. And so these images are from 517. Basically, I just added the frames of bees. I wanted to make sure she was still queen right. So it looks like I wrote in my notes, 4 frames of brood, 4 frames of adults, queen, check, white. So it looks like they're still slowly drawing out the wax here and here a little bit more. That brood is still the same brood that was previously. But I want to show what else is in here. This is these 2 frames moving kind of to the left. If I'm looking at those 2 frames, pulling them out and opening it, this is all new because that side was kind of, well, actually this was the old stuff. This is the new stuff. So they're starting to continue more drawing, and this is what we inserted here. What you can notice is that these are all eggs now. They've already come out because what I gave them was emerging that day. So they've already come out, and now she's already laid that entire frame full. And this is only after what, 5 days. Now, if I go on to this side of it, on the right side of the colony, same thing, pull it out, open it up, you can see that they are, this had nothing on it, but this is all new here. And this is some emerging brood right here. So they're still got some emerging brood. Hold on, there we go. And then that side is all eggs. And they're starting some new comb here too.
Did they have food frames in there as well? I'm assuming.
They had no. The only food that they had was a little bit here and a little bit here.
Huh.
They had food in the frames that I gave them.
Okay.
But they weren't really big, so they didn't really need a lot of food.
Yeah.
It wasn't a queen issue. So this is the video taken, what is it, the May 27th. So 10 days later.
Wait, so this is that same colony?
That's the same colony. If you guys can't hear the audio, I'm just going to turn it down. So basically, we put it on a second box on the 26th of May, which was basically another, a little over a week later. I put on another box. And now I'm going through this frame, and basically the entire top box, or that first frame, was food. And what I'm showing is oops, oh my goodness. eggs, and eggs. So let's try to put that back there. So that's eggs. They're making a queen cup. This next frame is eggs. And maybe, oh, that's the one we chimmied up.
Ooh. Judy, you are like the queen doctor, the bee doctor, the queen of bee doctors. I've never seen someone who's so good at correctly identifying a hive problem and fixing it and having the bees go along with it. You're good.
I'm just doing what they want to do instinctually, you know, and I'm trying. So that frame that you saw was sealed. That was the frame that was from the bottom box that I moved up to the second box to get them to chimney up and expand. And that's exactly what they did. Is they chimneyed up and she laid everywhere. So this is kind of the young larvae. And when I'm looking at the young larvae, I'm looking for brood food. Are they being well fed? Is there enough nutrition in there? They've already started collecting a lot more pollen and resources. That's why I don't really bother with giving them a lot of food stores if I know there's a lot already starting to bloom. So I am going to go down to this bottom box. I don't do thorough inspections for every hive, but if it's a problematic hive I'm troubleshooting, I'll just double check to see if it needs to be reversed. So that's what I'm checking for right now. I'm going down to see how they're using the frames down there and whether I need to rotate combs or move boxes, because I'm essentially trying to baby this colony to full potential for honey flow.
So what are you finding down there? It's mostly pollen
Well,
and nectar?
if you remember that colony on the bottom was really only 4, 5 frames before we put the second box on. I put that second box on because they're not drawing out comb like they need to, and she needs to lay. So we put on a box of empty comb. Does that make sense, you guys, evaluating whether or not you need to do a reversal? The frames right here are basically sealed brood and newly drawn comb towards the bottom. So there's plenty of places for her to lay and some extra room here. But the top box is full of eggs and starting to fill up with honey all around. And so that's going to take a long time for those bees to develop, and they're going to continue to squeeze that honey in. I'm moving the boxes so that she can kind of continue upward, but then I'm going to add a super on top. So what I want her to do is to move upward, reoccupy the top box and lay, and then the bees will start moving honey up top to the super. If I leave it like it is now, what's going to happen? If I leave it as it is now, you've got eggs up top and sealed brood on top. On the bottom, they're still going to kind of start putting food down below. They're going to start plugging it up with pollen and nectar, and they're going to start plugging it on the bottom, and they're going to start plugging it on the top. But it takes longer for those eggs to develop, and you saw in the bottom box it was ready to emerge, but lots of empty comb there. They're going to plug that with nectar. So I wanted to kind of reverse it so she can move the younger brood up top, and then the honey is up top, moving nectar and honey to the super. I see Randall's head like processing.
No. I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
Has anybody worked with a flow hive?
I'm sorry.
Has anyone worked with a flow hive yet?
Yeah, we Sheldon, you want to tell him about Rogan?
Yeah, so here at UNL, we have some connections with the people over in the Flow Hive in Australia, and so we're doing some evaluations on the Flow Hive this year. The Flow Hive, we have some pictures on our Facebook. You can see we had to add a second deep because they only give you one when you order one. But because of the way we are in the Midwest, we have to usually run off of 2 deeps, especially if we're going to try to get the Flow Hive through the winter. And the only proprietary difference between the Flow Hive and a regular hive is not in the deep, it's actually in the super. The super is where all that fancy stuff with the breaking and the draining it out happens. And so we put that on right now as a super, and we're seeing if they're going to be drawing that out and capping it and filling it with sugar. And so all other treatments and methods are going to be the same, except for your extraction. Since you can't do decapping and spinning out, you're actually going to have to continually extract as they fill it. So it's a lot more hands-on as far as what we can tell so far. We're going to have kind of a write-up and an eval probably at the end of the year and going into next year to see how well they overwintered and such. But all your mite treatments, all your supering times, all of your stuff like that is going to be similar. You're just going to have to probably do a couple of extractions. They can do this differently in Australia because they have multiple flows and they're in a semi-tropical environment. So they can, when we were talking with her, they said they'll extract 3 times, 4 times a year because they'll go up, check it. Oh, time to take some, let them refill it. And so it's designed in a different climate. So that's why we're evaluating it here in the Midwest.
Okay, because my first
Are
hive
you
is
doing,
actually flow hive.
Are you doing checking the moisture content then when you're breaking as part of your evaluation?
Yeah, we'll be extracting it into a separate bucket and then doing our normal hydrometer test. Not hydrometer, that's with mead making. Our refractometer tests with moisture content.
So currently on my flow hive, I just have the brood box and the flow part. Should I put another super on then?
Is it drawn out, the box?
They're getting there, and they have been moving up. I waxed the flow part, and they are up there starting to fill in the gaps and stuff, but they haven't started filling anything, or there's a few cells with pollen in it, but that's about it. But this was also the one where I had multiple queen cells and just 2 hatched today, and I moved one to a nuke and left the other one and 1 remaining queen cell there.
Yeah, it's tough because when you're recruiting a colony, sometimes they are really active and really good honey producers. They got nothing else to do, but it also does kind of gunk up your equipment. So when you go back and check for queen right and see if she's laying, see how much room she has to lay, how much of the drawn comb is there available for her to lay.
Okay.
And then if she needs more spaces, you can open it up by inserting a couple frames or giving her an entire box if you need to. It's hard to give her foundation because that's not going to give her any places to lay. So it really does have to be drawn comb.
Okay.
So does that make sense what I just did? Well, I basically put all the young brood to the bottom so that there's no space for them to plug it up with nectar. And so they have to move up the second box, but there's old brood there and the queen is relaying because that's what she wants to do. She wants to go towards the old brood and relay. So there's brood to the very top of the edge of the frames. So the bees will continue to go up past the second box, and what's past the second box is my super. That's where I want them to deposit all my nectar. So what I'm doing is making it young brood on the bottom of the box, so they take longer to develop, and then she can slowly move upward, which is what the queen naturally wants to do, and she'll find a bunch of old bees or I'm sorry, old sealed brood and new wax that's being drawn, because I just reversed it. And she'll start laying, and she'll continue to lay in that sealed brood that's emerging. All those bees will merge. She'll lay in that, and so essentially you're shifting that brood cluster to the center of the hive, expanding from the lower box to the top box in such a way that they're going to want to deposit the honey on up and around that cluster.
Yeah, you're essentially reorganizing to get that brood nest of mostly eggs at the bottom. And then the bees are naturally inclined to work their way up. So because otherwise the cap brood in that bottom deep would have just emerged, and they would have left all those cells either empty, or they would have been storing nectar in there that you actually want up in your honey super. Well, Judy, you have robot voice again. Let's see if she can get that under control. Yeah, I think it sounds better.
Okay, yeah, because the queen basically wants to go upward, and so if she's up in the top box, she might actually feel crowded and want to swarm. Meanwhile, the bottom box, the bees are emerging out of their cells, and they'll start to plug it up with nectar. So that's why I'm just redistributing it during the beginning of the nectar flow, and when I'm first introducing that super, so that they start plugging it in the right place. What you don't want to happen is to have a 3-inch layer of honey on the frames at the top of your box and then brood down here, because that honey is their roof, is their ceiling. They're going to start moving that honey downward because you've already created their roof. So what you're wanting to do is bring the brood all the way to the top of the box. So now they're shifting the honey to the top in your supers. Does that make sense?
Cap brood.
The capped brood, yeah. And then the other fun thing we did was bee beards. That's Sheldon. I'm showing people your photos.
That's fine.
The costumes, I love it.
Every year we do a something bearded costume. Although the first year we did it was tie-dye themed, but this year it's pirates. Next year it might be like Santa or something else, lumberjack.
I kind of want to do Gandalf
Yes, with like a long pipe.
with a big staff. I just want to say, "You shall not pass." Big beard of bees.
Do you purchase pheromone, or do you just get a queen?
We just hang her under
These
the
are
chin.
just our packages, yeah.
Oh,
We try to do bee beards as kind of a fun reward for the students. Around the same time we get packages and start classes and things like that.
quick bee beard question. Can I do a bee beard if I already have a beard?
We recommend
I don't-
shaving. Like
Hmm.
Luke shaved his before he did it, and then we just grew it back afterwards.
Nope, I've never not had my beard. So
I
mean,
wonder what you'd look like, Randall. That'd be interesting.
The bees don't, it doesn't look as full because they don't like that hair. So then you end up having like lots of bees in the collar and on the cheek, so it's kind of like an odd lumpy beard.
Okay, good to know.
You could probably keep the mustache because I don't ever get them up past my lip because it tickles so much that I can never really get them. And I don't really want them right under my nose either because when you're breathing, it kind of annoys them. So you could probably keep the stash and then just let them be down below.
Okay, I'm getting more convinced. Maybe we'll do it next year when we're doing packages.
There's a reason for you to come visit us.
Yeah, definitely.
Normally don't do that unless you know how to, or you have someone to help you with it, because we do add cotton in certain places so your bees aren't
Vaseline.
in your ears and your nose, and we prep with Vaseline and stuff. But yeah, it is a fun thing if you're not afraid of having close contact with bees. It kind of feels like when you're limb goes numb and it's starting to wake up and you got those pins and needles sensation. That's what it feels like. It's hot and you get like pins and needle sensation because of the little legs.
Fun.
And you could probably do it if you're bald, Arthur. They would just probably tickle like all get out.
I had a fellow colleague or student that did a bikini, and she put the queen like, yeah, and not for me, but she did it.
We're running quick on time. I got a question from beekeepers here in Iowa, Jim and Penny Dolezal, who couldn't make it today, but I think they're going to watch the recording. And they wanted to know what your thoughts were because they felt like a lot of the photos they were seeing that people were showing us in past meetings had only 9 frames in the deep instead of 10. And they wanted to know what your thoughts were on 9 frames versus 10 frames. Yeah, go ahead.
The simple rule is if it's drawn, I go with 9. If it's not drawn, I go with 10. Because if you have some frames that are still in that foundation, I mean, there's just too much wiggle room. You're going to get a lot of burr comb and you're going to have a lot of issues with that. So if I have undrawn frames in there, I run 10 frames in there. If it's drawn comb, I'll run 9, and I'll use my fingers to space it because it's just easier than to have to, pry and pull that frame out and rub all those bees off and then, squeeze out all that honey. I just don't like making that mess. That's for the brood box. For people running supers, same thing. If you have them drawn, do 10. If they're drawn out completely, do 9 because that extra space. Some people even do 8, but do 9. That extra space that gives them, just a little bit off of that wood makes it easier to cut and uncap.
Yeah, I've been more familiar with running 9 in your supers, but not in your deeps so much. Just because I know whenever I lift a deep and I can feel that it only has 9 frames in it because I can feel them going back and forth.
Yeah, then they're not ready for 9. Yeah, I like the 9 system just because I think what happens is people who run 9 don't realize that the spacing has to also be in between the wood too, right? So they're usually accustomed to sticking the outer frames right up against the wood, and then that creates more gapping. I use my fingers, but I will use it on either side of the frame and we'll start gapping it right against the box on either side. Otherwise, you still have too much wiggle room because you're shoving the frames all the way to its edge and then you've got more space. Use your fingers is a good measure of spacing.
Yeah, and I like the 9 frames as the guy who's trying to not roll every single bee he touches, because sometimes when you get those 10 framers, it's carnage, that first frame getting it out. It's honey spilled, and then the bees are just all mad after that.
Yeah, as someone who always does 10 frames, the honey is the thing. Whenever they've got a bunch of capped honey on there, that causes a big problem for sure.
And I always start from the second frame in.
Yeah, me too.
There's no point. Unless I'm looking for the queen. And she's not in the first where I think it is. Sometimes I'll go out to the, outer frames, but most of the time I focus on the inner frames. Cool. What's our topic next month? What do you guys want to hear?
Yeah, it'll be what? It'll be July, right? It'll be July 2nd will be our next meeting. So
Summer mite treatments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get your supers on.
Yep.
We'll have our supers on. We'll be talking about, pulling honey supers and doing mite treatments, I think. Early mite treatments, as early as possible.
That's so the word from California was the hives that had the best survival were the ones that had formic on them while honey supers were on.
But I can't do that where I live. It's too hot.
You have keep an eye on the forecast and pick the right days.
So with formic, for those who don't know, with formic acid, you can't have it on if it's going to be above 85 degrees, especially in the
For
first 5 days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't they just change the label for OA?
Yeah, you can do OA in the summertime, but I don't think that they've changed it. I think that technically, if you're doing it on label, you can only do it once a year. So it wouldn't make sense for me to do OA while there's brood in the middle of the summer.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, if it's off, that would be off label, but yeah, it could be done. It would just require, several treatments for the whole.
So I've got a plan. I'm gonna do a kind of a Killian OTS combination. I'm pulling my queens later this week, and then I'll treat with the OA here in about 3 weeks. Do that brood break, see if I can get some extra honey production.
So you're gonna take your queens out, and then you're gonna do oxalic acid drench, or
Yeah, at the appropriate time. I mean, once all that, all the broods emerged, them raise their own queens.
I would love to hear more about that, because I have read about the recommendation of caging your queen and then doing something like oxalic acid, but I've never heard about people. I don't know anyone who does it, so I've never been able to like pick someone's brain about it or try it myself, because I would always be worried that they would start rearing a new queen, or I could get laying workers.
Well, see, and that's my plan. I'm not gonna cage her. I'm gonna put her in a nuke and let her keep laying, and let them raise a queen, and then keep the existing queen working.
You're splitting, essentially.
Yeah. So she'll be in a non-honey producing hive, so I can put Apivar or whatever on her.
Yep, that's exactly right. Like you don't have to be a traditional brood break. You could pair your treatments with splits. Or when you're requeening, a lot of people requeen in the spring. So sometimes you can cut the queen or kill the old queens, do your treatments, introduce your next queens, but you've had this, you can incorporate treatments. The idea is the brood breaking allows, the brood to, the window of treatment, to basically push all the bees that are in sealed brood out as adults. So you have all the mites on the backs of the adults, and then the new brood is still young enough where none of the mites will have gone in. So you've got this window of time where you don't have in your colony any of the mites in the cells. That's when you hit them with the treatment.
We should talk about that next time.
Cool. Let's do it.
Okay.
Maybe Andy can take some photos and show us how it.
Yeah, I'll try to document how it goes. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And then I'll try to bring up the brood breaking calendar map to kind of show you the math of it, or with the developmental.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. It's good to chat.
Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.